Subscribe our Top Rock YouTube channel and press bell icon.
Frozen Peak. 12. Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir is a figure surrounded by fame and infamy, even in death. Although he passed away in 1924, anyone can still go see him in his mausoleum in Moscow's Red Square. When he died, Soviet authorities decided that they wanted future generations to be able to see his body. A few forms of preservation were considered, including literally freezing his corpse. They finally decided on embalming him. To this day, Lenin's corpse requires a daily maintenance of injections and embalming baths. 11. Otzi. One of the most infamous frozen people is Otzi. He was living sometime between 3359 and 3105 BCE, and most likely died from a blow to his head. Humankind's ability to preserve dead bodies wasn't exactly sophisticated back then, so how did Otzi's body survive all these years? He died in a cold mountain range in Europe, and the cold, dry air preserved his body. Scientists could tell what his clothes were made of, and even what kind of food he ate. 10. Lady Xin Shu. Meet Lady Xin Shu, also known as Lady Dai. She was the wife of a politician during the Han Dynasty who died in 163 BCE. She was obscured by the fame of her husband. 2,000 years later, Lady Dai would finally be famous in her own right. Her tomb was uncovered in 1972, and experts discovered that her body remained largely undamaged and resisted decomposition. She had been wrapped in 20 layers of clothing and silk ribbons, and an unknown liquid with high amounts of acidity and magnesium that kept her body moist and preserved. She was so well preserved, her muscles stayed limber, and her joints could still bend without snapping. 9. Rosalia Lombardo. This is Rosalia Lombardo, a young girl who died of pneumonia at just 2 years old nearly 100 years ago in 1920. Her father had a hard time coping with the loss, so he called upon an expert embalmer to keep her around. The embalmer mixed together a combination of formalin, alcohol, salicylic acid, and glycerin which he applied to her body, allowing her to stay around for years longer. Her corpse is kept at the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo in Sicily. She has been given the nickname Sleeping Beauty because of her eternally peaceful expression. 8. Tulln Man. Bogs are wetlands with excessive amounts of peat and have become notorious for preserving dead bodies to terrifying detail. Often, the peat will preserve wrinkles in the faces as well as hair and clothes. One of the specimens found in the bogs of Jutland Peninsula in Denmark is the Tulln Man. Scientists believe that the Tulln Man lived and died during the 4th century BCE. Despite being dead for centuries, the peat had preserved the Tulln Man so well, the locals who discovered him thought he was a fresh murder victim. 7. Dashi Dorzo Itigila. This Buryat Buddhist monk had 2 requests before he died. The first, that he would be buried in the exact position that he died, and second, that he would be exhumed years after his burial. Itigilov actually died while sitting and meditating in the lotus position. He was buried in this position and was taken out of the ground, still sitting in the exact same spot. While some believe that he resisted decomposition because of reaching a state of nirvana, reporters noted that Ichilov was buried and packed in salt, which probably helped with preservation. 6. The Beauty of Xiaohe. In 2003, archaeologists were excavating the Xiaohe Moody graveyards when they discovered an entire cache of well-preserved mummies, including one known as the Beauty of Xiaohe. Her hair, skin, and even eyelashes were still intact. She earned her name because her beauty seemed to transcend 4 millennia. She was a village leader and was dressed in something that designated her as a priestess, which was rare for women at the time. She was preserved by the natural aridity and salinity in the air, which freezing and preserving corpses are predisposed to. 5. Saint Zita. The patron saint of maids, Saint Zita, spent her entire life taking care of those who needed her, which is why she was inducted into sainthood. The people loved her so much that when she died in 1272 AD, many people claim that a star appeared above her house. Her body was exhumed in 1580, and it was discovered that she barely decomposed in all that time. She was finally canonized in 1696, and her frozen body remains on display in the Basilica di San Frediano in her hometown of Lucca, Italy. 4. Evita Peron. Evita died of cancer in 1952, and as the wife of Argentinian President Juan Perón, she was one of the most beloved figures in the country. This is what led to the decision by President Perón to embalm his wife. Perón hired Dr. Pedro Ana, who was so good at embalming, they referred to his technique as the art of death. He would replace the blood and water in a body with glycerin, which preserved all the organs. The process took a year to complete, and apparently Evita remained so lifelike that the man in charge of watching over her body went mad with lust and fell in love with Miss Perron. After the process had been finished, she was finally buried. 3. The Wet Mummy. The Wet Mummy lived 700 years ago and was submerged for 600 years in a waterlogged coffin. Remarkably, this Ming Dynasty era mummy was discovered in the middle of a town during a construction project. The woman was 5 feet tall and was fully clothed, buried with jewelry, and a massive jade ring. She was unearthed during a construction project and found completely immersed in a brown fluid. 2. Churchin Man. The discovery of the Churchin Man forced many historians to reinterpret what they used to think about Eastern and Western civilizations. That's because the Churchin Man was discovered buried in China, despite being of Caucasian origin. He is one of what has since become several hundred mummies now known as China's Celtic mummies. He was wearing European wool and stayed perfectly preserved, including his garb. DNA testing definitively confirmed that he was of European descent, but how he and other European bodies ended up in China is still a mystery. 1. La Doncella. This 15-year-old Incan girl seems to have been sacrificed by her people more than 500 years ago. We can tell she was sacrificed because the extremely cold weather perfectly preserved her body at the summit. At 22,000 feet in the air, she was kept in perfect condition despite no effort to try and preserve her body. She was also found with 2 other frozen corpses, a 7-year-old boy and 6-year-old girl, who all seemed to be sacrificed in some sort of ritual at the summit of the mountain. Many have nicknamed these discoveries as the sleeping children of Inca because they look as if they died slowly in a sleeping position before their bodies moved.